Brew Nation, so happy New Year. What a way to end 2022 with Brad Hightower. Uh, I got Brad on. Brad's wearing an awesome shirt. I guess we just start with thanking the sponsor Viva Systems. And Brad Hightower, for those that don't, I mean, who doesn't know you, man? I feel like, actually people are now discovering me because of you. It happened yesterday.
Full
Somebody
circle.
messaged me. Yeah, he's like, hey, you know what? The only reason I clicked on your profile is because Brad liked your post. I was like, oh, thanks, man. Come on over. The water's warm. So, Brad, man, you've like blown up over the last few years, especially on LinkedIn, and it'd be interesting to see how you take your career and especially your podcasting career further. But nice shirt, man. Thank you for wearing that one.
Of course, I gotta represent, and I always say, I mean, look, a lot of really the reason I, broke off and started my own site was from watching your content. You've been doing this a long time. You're the godfather of clinical trial content. So, always been inspired by the work you've done. So I appreciate that, man.
That's crazy, man. I wonder how many future Brad Hightowers we're inspiring you now. You're inspiring now with Note to File podcasts in the future. Like, it's kind of cool to see that happening. And it's always good to get like real community-based people doing research, especially ones like you're tapped into your community down there in Oklahoma. We're going to get into a lot of that. This episode, I wanted to kind of talk about employees, retention, training. It's something that is not discussed that often, and it's actually one of the things that I don't know if I've struggled with, but it's been one of my biggest challenges is like managing. That it's probably not my strength. My strength is growing things,
Sure.
not so much managing. But I've gotten better over the years. So we're gonna get into all that. We're gonna get into your cool post on how you attract talent from Indeed by storytelling. I I think that's amazing. We're gonna get into that. But before we get into that, we want to thank Viva. All right, Viva. By the way, Note to File podcast is also sponsored by Viva.
Indeed.
Um, Shout out to Bree and Abby behind the scenes. So Viva, they have Site Vault. If you are a site and you want to dabble and you haven't dabbled because you say, well, I don't know. I'm not ready for it. Plus I have to pay for it. You don't have to. At least you don't have to pay for it with Viva Site Vault. It's completely free. The plan is to never charge sites. Sponsors are subsidizing this. Viva has enough capitalization. I mean, they're a huge company. Just go look at their stock. I've been told not to discuss their market cap, but go look at the stock yourself and see on a real time what it is, okay? They can play the long game. So they want sites to adopt because they know that more sponsors are going to pay them for their services and all their back end stuff too. It's not just Site Vault. Like sponsors use them for trial master files. Sponsors use them for a bunch of things. So try it out. I've played with everything. I think it's great. My goal for 2023 is the delegation of authorities log digitally. Have you played with that yet, Brad?
Not no, not yet, not yet.
I've been a little afraid, man.
I know, me too. I see it there, and it makes sense to me. But yeah, it's a little it's a little intimidating to sort of change your way of thinking about how that form's. You've been filling it out for the last 15 years, you know.
Mhm. I will though. I will next year, in early next year. So we just had a SIV yesterday. I had the opportunity. We had like our ISF come in. We're all digital now, but the ISF came in and we did everything except DOA log. And I was sitting there with coordinator and the monitor. And I was like, should we do this electronically? And then, we had to go visit a X-ray place. We had to visit a ophthalmology. We had to wait for our PI to come in. There was so many things like pressing time. And we said, no, let's just do digital or let's just do wet ink. And then we'll upload it to Viva Site Vault after. But you can still do that. You can use regular delegation of authority log and upload it to Viva. But if you really want to jump in on the deep end, you can do electronic DOA, which Brad and I are eventually going to build up the courage to do. But in either case, sites.veeva.com, free. Not only that, once you join, let's say you join and you don't even use it for a while, your site's added to a list that only sponsors have access to that lets them know, hey, these sites are the sites using Veeva Vault. So I don't know. Maybe you even get some studies out of it. Anyways, free. The people at Veeva are really cool. Um, if Brad and I think they're decent folks, I think that's a good barometer. But judge for yourself, guys. Go check it
Yeah,
out.
there's no risk to try it. And again,
None.
we're slowly in the process of moving everything over. If that tells you anything,
How's
it's
that been
big.
going? Maybe that's a
It's a
good
lot of work.
transition. How are
Well,
you handling that day to day, like
it's
moving it?
been we're still on the front end and moving very slowly. But and this maybe ties into the bigger conversation too, because I've been doing a lot of our regulatory work, even still. Managing some of that on my own, and now I'm starting to slowly train another employee to start managing the regulatory. Um, so yeah, it's just been a slow, steady
Mm.
process of getting everything built out. The nice thing about Viva is it's all templated out like perfectly for you, right? You don't have to reinvent the wheel by coming up with naming conventions or document types. It's all kind of there for you. That's not a plug for Viva. Like that's legitimately makes it just so much easier to deal with rather than dealing with sort of a blank canvas. It's already kind of well put together for you. So
Yep.
it's nice and intuitive. If I can train somebody to do it who's never even really worked in a reg binder before, that's a good sign, right?
Yeah, January 5th, we're interviewing another person who I think will be our hire. Um, but another thing about Viva, as we transition this conversation into employees and hiring, they'll fight for you. Like if your monitor wants to argue about, well, this is not allowed, they told us, hey, we have SOPs, whatever you want. We'll even like, we'll even get on the phone with them. I don't know how long that's gonna last, but they're willing to do it now. If you're having issues, message me and I'll connect you with someone that can fight for you. It's like Larry H. Parker. We'll fight for you. Okay, employees. How many studies do you have right now? Hightower,
So
Brad from
yeah,
Hightower
so
Clinical, by the way.
I think we have around 65 active studies, and that's not all enrolling.
65
Yeah, not
studies?
not all enrolling, and some are in follow up. So it's kind of across the board.
65 is no joke, man. You're competing with some academic medical centers now.
I mean, yeah, it's actually been pretty surprising how been able to grow so quickly
Whoa.
and on a fairly small staff. I think we have 12 employees. So if you do the math, that can be sounds like a lot. Um, I always intended to keep the workload small for our coordinators, but as it's such a five studies doesn't equal five studies, right? Like they're so different from one another. Some are very simple, some are very complicated. So there's always some there's
Oh
always
yeah.
some art to balancing that as much as you can. And I certainly haven't gotten it all figured out, but working on it every day.
And you never know which study. I mean, you have a theory like, hey, this study's gonna generate good revenue for us, and then you actually end up doing it, and you're like, oh, never mind. I was wrong about that one, and then another one will surprise you and say, yeah, I'm glad I didn't say no to this one because it's actually doing well.
Yeah, it's I've noticed I was talking to somebody about that just the other day. I feel like there's such a 80-20 rule sort of, like your 20% of your trials are doing probably 80% of your revenue, but
I
you don't know what
know.
those are going to be. You don't know what they're going to be until it's kind of, I mean, obviously the more you do it, you can kind of get an inkling, but to your point, some of the ones that you're like, this is going to be the one, and you get it and it's just a dog. And then vice versa,
Yeah.
you get some that are like, this might be tough, and then it ends up crushing. So, I think you gotta be in the game and have your processes in place, and then you're ready for when the big one does strike.
Yes. Sometimes you do get it right because it's so obvious. And you're like, yeah, I know
Sure,
this one's gonna
sure.
do well. And then you get it and you're like, yep, it's exactly what I thought. But that doesn't happen that often. Maybe once a year, that kind of study, I think. 65 is a good amount. So you start just like a 1 minute summary. You started this thing what in 2016 or something like that?
It's been just about five. I think it'll be 5 years in February that I broke off from my old job
Wow.
and
So
started doing this full time.
2018,
Yeah,
you
that's right.
started Hightower Clinical, and you get to the point where you have 65 sites or 65 studies. Um, what was that first year like? How many studies did you get or did
It
you
was
have?
it was very slow. It was me in a 10 by 10 room in a cardiology practice,
Ooh.
but by myself. I landed two kind of not great studies. They were very slow. I got a few patients in, um, and yeah, it wasn't that exciting, right? And then I was able to bring in a neurologist and land a migraine study, and that was the first one
Ooh.
that propelled me to the next level. So it was had a couple that sort of treaded water. They were fine, but they didn't really put me anywhere exciting. Was able to land that migraine, and that kind of bumped me up. Okay, now I can get some help in here. I can start continuing to grow. And it's been kind of like that, a series of growth with some plateauing, and then when
Mhm.
those next money makers come, we can start to grow again, and you plateau for a little while, and
So the
you
end of
know
that first year, what you had like what like half a dozen trials with
at the
it?
end of the first year, I think that's probably fair. Yeah, I think there were a couple of like low level registries that weren't really
Hmm.
much, and then a couple of drug trials that were kind of meh, and then one good migraine study that brought us a
That's all
few
you need.
$100,000.
That's
I
all you
mean,
need.
it is. Well, that's where
Wow.
it's interesting to me. I look back sometimes and I think like I could have stayed small. I could have stayed with just me and another person or two. Probably I had worked my ass off, but been very happy with what came along with that. And I sometimes wonder if that would have been the smarter move versus trying to scale out too much.
I think
Not
that
that I've scaled
depends.
out too much, but
No, you've definitely grown this thing, and you just sounds like you're just getting started. But I think that's like a lifestyle business, like what you just
right,
mentioned, is something that's underrated because you're right. Like I always tell people, if you do two studies and you're the coordinator, like I have a lot of conversations with burnt out CRAs that I know could be good site owners. And I tell them like, hey, two studies, keep it simple. Two studies, you're the coordinator. Just bite the bullet for 9 months. Like you're not going to get any payment other than the startup. You can replace your salary with just moderately enrolling. You don't need to be high enrolling, just
right,
moderately enrolling. And it's pretty simple to run two trials. I mean, you've got two monitors that are going to bug you every 8 weeks, and that's about it. And you know what it's like to be a monitor because you are currently a monitor bugging other people.
right, right.
So
What? But I mean, it's I've I always heard the term lifestyle business, and I always thought that felt like derogatory for some reason. But I mean, to your point, I think it's complicated. You have to start hiring people, and you can't always be there with them every second of every day, to make sure. And this isn't the kind of work where you train somebody for a week and you're like, cool, you're on your own. Good luck. Which I know is something we want to talk about a little bit today because I think you're right. I like you. I think I'll admit I feel like it's always been a struggle to train
mhm.
in a very effective way or efficient. It's just not efficient. I feel like it just takes time, and it's not always something you have a lot of. Especially if you like us, we hire a lot of people who don't have research experience.
Almost everyone. Um, yeah, that's a perfect segue. But I do want to add, I have a theory, and I don't know your answer actually. So that first PI, your cardiologist, I have a saying. It's probably 80% true, 80% of the time. Your first PI will leave you. Are you still working with that first PI?
No, not really.
See, guys, I'm
And
telling you.
I think more broadly, like the more successful you are, like the harder it gets to keep working with the physician because for a lot of different reasons, all of a sudden they think, oh, well, I need more money or I can do this without you. I've seen all kinds of different wackiness happen, but yeah, in some ways, it's like you suffer for being too successful sometimes.
I see that. I've experienced that, but in my experience is usually that first PI leaving you is because it takes longer, much longer than they think to start seeing payment. And then the second guy or gal comes in and they get paid almost immediately because it's everything that guy walked away from. So the
Sure.
second one's like, this is awesome. And then they might get into that, head in the clouds thing where this is too good. And then the problems you discussed. But yeah, that's like another podcast.
Yeah, sorry.
Let's get into employees because this is something not discussed a lot. You brought this up. I think it was you or Dr. Fox that had a post recently about, or somebody from Magi. I think it was Norm from Magi. Like, there's a lot of people talking about this theme, okay? Employees, sites, inexperienced or experienced. I guess let's start from the beginnings. Why do you tend to hire inexperienced?
I think it's a few reasons. I mean, look, I came in obviously at some point you have to come in without experience. Nobody starts out with research experience, but I look back like in the start of my career in research, I was a phlebotomist. I liked, you know, what I did, but I wanted to do something more. When I came into research, I hated it. I didn't know what the hell I was doing. It took me probably 2 solid years before I had any clue how all this stuff fit together. It was, I was part of an academic institution. Nobody really took the time to show me how it worked or really train me in any meaningful way. So eventually I figured it out over a lot of trial and error. But I came to love it. I mean, there's so much breadth. Like whatever you like, it exists somewhere, I think, in the clinical trial space, right? So I was like, man, this is like a, a hidden gem that people just don't know about. So for me, it's like I want to spread that to other people. There's a lot of people out there who are smart, capable, have jobs they don't like. Well, it doesn't have to be that way. I love to bring people into the industry and sort of share that, experience with them. And then you've obviously got, like, I'm in Oklahoma City. There's not exactly a bustling research community. I mean, you can go to the university, but I feel like, and this is a post I made recently, is somebody complaining about their experience in an academic institution. Like, they don't exactly breed the greatest clinical research coordinators with the best habits in the world. So I also think you kind of have the benefit of potentially a blank slate of training somebody the way that you do things.
Yeah, I agree. I think one of the thing like I learned this by accident. So one of my first employees back in 2006 was our front desk receptionist. And she's been the front desk receptionist for the psychiatry group for years. And I just got to the point where I had no more capacity to do work. And I said one day, I told her, hey, you want to do research? We'll find another receptionist. Um, and she said, okay. And fast forward, what, 12, no, 15 years later, she's a site owner. And this is receptionist. Like, there's no way this would have been possible in a regular, like, academic position or a university or just a large clinic. But she caught the right wave at the right time. And I think a lot of people like MAs, medical assistants, CNAs, phlebotomists, like you said,
Mm-hmm.
um, don't even know. And I think to some extent they make the best employees because in a way, and this is what I really want to unpack because I don't know what it is, but I feel like once they see the opportunity, they're super grateful for it and they work really hard for it.
Yeah, no,
And
I tend to agree. I mean, again, I mean, this, like, the sky's the limit at a site, especially if you're not bound by some like weird bureaucracy of an academic institution. So, I mean, a coordinator, depending on how they're managed and treated, can do extremely well. It doesn't have to be that you get the same crappy salary whether you enroll 0 patients or 1,000 patients, which is oftentimes how academic institutions work. There's no incentive in fact, there's more of an incentive for a coordinator not to enroll patients because
yeah,
then they got no paperwork, they got no trouble they can get into. It's easier to
yeah,
find reasons to exclude patients. That's been my observation across, other institutions. So I think,
Oh,
yeah, to your point, you can actually create an environment where like people can go very far. They can have rewarding work and make good money. Now it's easier said than done, but that opportunity exists.
the opportunity exists. There is growth that needs to happen, especially when you're dealing with people who are technically trained, but not, um, they don't have the educational background. There is a good amount of writing needed for progress notes and but what I've noticed, these MAs, these CNAs, these farm techs, these even the front desk receptionists, like once all you're doing all day is like refilling prescriptions for psych meds, you start learning like, okay, these are con meds. Like in research,
Hmm.
what are those? Those are con meds. They
Right.
already know this stuff, whereas someone with a master's degree or a PhD might not even know like the day-to-day practical things of what these medications are. They might know in theory, like, oh, this is the class of drugs, but they don't know like the milligrams, the generic name, the brand name, and like these farm techs, MAs, CNAs do.
Yeah. Yeah. No, and look, it's been a while since I've been in academia, but I have to assume it's mostly the same. But when I started in, I didn't have my degree yet, and I was treated basically like an idiot, you know, uh, because academia is a lot about how many letters you have after your name. But to your point, that's nothing to do with how capable you can be as a coordinator or in any role within research. So yeah, I'm with you. I think again, you can create big opportunity for people who don't necessarily have to have years and years of schooling. Not that that's a bad thing by any stretch, but more
No,
degrees doesn't make you any more effective as a coordinator
it's not a
necessarily.
bad thing. It's not a bad thing, but I feel bad for there's still more people than not that choose to get another degree as opposed to just starting small at a small research site. And I think it's a disservice to them. I don't think that's the practical route. I think that's the route that might feel most comfortable, um, but not the best thing for them. I've just seen
Yeah.
this like anecdotally from my own experiences.
Yeah.
Um,
Unless you want to do bench science or publish, I mean, yeah,
that's
I don't
different.
see.
That's so
Yeah, that's a
different.
whole different. Yeah, I agree.
I made a audacious little YouTube short the other day where I said, "Hey, you know what? Like this debate kept coming up about more degrees or just start doing more work." And it's like obviously, the answer is the latter, but I made this audacious comparison of like if a PhD Nobel Prize winner applied to my site to be a CRC versus somebody I know who's like can just get the job done. I mean, let's be honest, I'd probably pick the Nobel Prize winner for the marketing, but like take that aside, like in a vacuum, I don't think I'm picking the Nobel Prize winner. Like,
Right.
can they retain patients? Like, if a patient doesn't want to come in, will they get in their car and drive the patient to our site? Or are they too, prissy and say, "Oh, I want a Nobel Prize. I'm not going to do that." So, yeah, I mean, extreme example will never happen, but it just like illustrates a point.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. And that's where, I do look, my interview process is not very technical, but it's a lot about, I just want to get to know the people who are trying to hire, right? I think
Hmm.
the soft skills are just incredibly underrated. You're not going to necessarily pick that up on a CV or resume, but
No.
to your point, you want people who are going to do what it takes to get the job done. And, a lot of times in the beginning, that's being comfortable with being uncomfortable as a new coordinator. I find that's a challenge for even, I worked at a place where we hired a lot. They always hired nurses, very experienced nurses, which you think would always be a great fit, but it's not. A lot of them don't like that uncertainty in what they're doing and not knowing, because again, it's kind of a long training process to get somebody up as a coordinator. And so one of the first things I tell people is, hey, man, get used to not knowing what you're doing. Not that you're dumb or an idiot. It's just that you're not going to know for a while. You're just not going to know.
Well, yeah, I mean, we're dumb and we don't know either, and we're the site
Exactly.
directors most of the time.
Exactly.
So,
That's what I tell them. I go, hey man, every time there's a new study, I gotta like refigure things out. No, nothing is the same.
that's
That's
so
maybe a
true,
stretch,
man.
but there's some processes that are the same, but they have to be, in my mind, and they should be rethought and sort of customized for each project that you do. And I think that's where, again, just get used to not knowing and not knowing what you don't know as well.
That's we can go with like that segment. There's so many tangents. Like that particular thing you just said, when it's a new study, none of us really know. It's so true. And like research naive, there's people, we have clients. I think you talked to us way back when you were starting about our client services, but like we have like 85 sites more or less that basically pay us a monthly fee to help them with everything. Like primarily it's to get studies and budgets, but it's really everything. Shoulder to cry on. We had a client recently. We told him not to take on this many studies, but he took on a bunch of studies and we create source for them. And, sort like when you create source, we always give them the caveat. Look, compare it against the protocol. Like we don't know your protocol. There's no way we could know. We have years of experience. There's no way we're gonna know the protocol better than you should or your CRA. So when your CRA comes at the SIV, rather than asking her to read slides all day, show her your source and say, hey, is this okay? Is this the order? 80% of the time, the issues are the order of assessments is incorrect because you need to do certain order. And this person's like, yeah, man, I messed up, but like I'm research naive. And we tell them, we're all research naive when we start a new study. Like you're in the equal playing field. You may not know the process like somebody else does, but that protocol, you are brand new, just like everyone else doing that study. So it's not an excuse not to know your protocol. Like that's the grind. You have to, every new study, you got to learn it. You're starting over.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And I think also not to be afraid to like reiterate if you need to, like you're going to get it wrong
Hmm.
probably at first. So just know, all right, after you see a patient and you go into your EDC and you realize, well, shit, I did this wrong, go back and change it,
Yeah.
keep improving it until you get, closer to the truth, don't let, perfect be the enemy of good, as they say, you gotta get out there and start doing it.
Hmm. Preempt the monitor by just doing your first capital plan right there. Like
There you go.
I discovered it. This is what we're gonna do to fix it. Um, okay, employees put in a week, exactly a week from today, I'm interviewing what should be my third coordinator. This one, unlike the others and unlike my norm, um, comes from UC San Diego. So it comes from a academic, but I looked at their LinkedIn profile and it wasn't that long. So like I see that as like almost negative. Like, oh, thank God she wasn't indoctrinated long enough. And it
Right.
looks like she was in a patient recruitment role, but she's done some research coordinator things too. So I'm actually interviewing someone with experience, but you were saying that, when you interview, you don't really get into technical stuff. So what are some things you would ask her if you were me next week during this interview?
Well, again, a lot of times my approach for interviewing, it may not be very scientific, but again, I almost try to make a lot of small talk and just get to know the person. I mean, look, at the end of the day, most of what we do can be trained, right? Train people on how to understand, research, but there's a couple of underrated things. I think one is like working with people that you actually like and don't,
Mm,
which again doesn't have anything to do with the research specifically. But then just the underlying things, like again, are they going to be reliable and trustworthy? Are they going to show up? Are they going to go be able to work without being micromanaged, right? And I think a lot of times you can get some of that stuff out just by having a conversation with them, getting to know them as a person. I don't know. That's I know again that's not a very strong answer, but a lot of times that's what how I perform my interviews. Again, I can read off the paper, or we can have a brief conversation. What did you do? What did you do previously that we think might be able to sort of relate to what you're doing now? But I think it's underrated to just talk. Don't not necessarily make them jump through a bunch of hoops because anyone also can answer. They know people know how to ace interviews now, right? They know how to answer
yeah.
questions in a way that what are your strengths? What do you think is your biggest weakness? People know how to spin that. But a lot of times, if you can break down past that and just get to them as a person, I think you can learn a lot.
Hmm. It's essentially kind of what I do also. Very, very unconventional, but I think the smaller the site, the more unconventional you have to be. Um, so yeah, thank you for that. I think it's basically confirming what I was gonna do. Likability is, especially at the smaller site level, super important. I think actually a lot of what these academics um don't bring to the table mainly because they've been jaded. Like the longer you've been there, the more generally the like more pissed off you are, and the more jaded you are at the industry.
Well, and
It's
like I
something I've
know,
noticed.
yeah, I know you've been kind of on your own for a while, but the last job I worked in, it was a large hospital, but when I started, there were, I don't know, 15 or 20 coordinators, but everyone had their door shut. Nobody would talk to each other. It was just, you could like slice the tension with a knife walking into the office, and it was miserable. Nobody liked what they were doing. It was just people like running out the clocks on their day every day, and I don't think that that's unnecessarily super rare. Again, if you go read some, people's experiences at sites, it's can be downright miserable. And to your point, like, I still consider us pretty small, all things considered, but it's so much more important when you're a small, tight knit group. You need cooperation. You need people that want to help each other and that can get
Yeah,
along and get things done. I think that's, again, just stupidly underrated.
you have to have it. And in a small site like us, I mean, this person's literally gonna take my desk. The room that we share, there's three desks. And so there's two girls now and me. And this person's theoretically gonna just take my desk and allow me to work from home more often than not. So it's like literally you have forced to work together. You can't, there is no closing your door. We're in the same room. So you have
Right.
to get along. Don't you ever worry, like the bigger you get, the more processes you have to put into place that you're going to lose that culture?
Of course. Yeah. I think so. And that's, again, I've stressed this with people. It's a weird conundrum for me because I want to grow, but I also don't want to outgrow who we are. You know what I mean? To your point.
Hmm.
Um, because I feel like, for better or worse, a lot of what we do is so relationship based, whether it be your coordinators, me and my coordinators, or my coordinators amongst themselves, my coordinators and the PIs, the coordinator and the clinic staff that contribute to helping identify patients who let us, work within their space. Obviously, CRAs and sponsors, and I feel like, to your point too, as you need to make more processes, you become a little less able to personalize and customize like what you do. And for better or worse, I do think that's extremely important in the success, is not trying to make what you do cookie cutter. Like we already talked about, you get a new protocol, you got to sort of break that thing apart and make it
Yeah.
work where you are, which means every doctor we work with is different. Their office is different. There's politics to consider. There's uh, the doctor's schedule, how the doctor likes to be worked with. You have to take all those things into consideration. And so I think when you try to lay generic processes on top, you're setting yourself up to fail because you're not, connecting in a way that makes the trial successful, if that makes sense.
Don't tell some of these consultants that, Brad. They're gonna throw acronyms at you and say, well, you need a SMART plan or
I
something like
know.
that.
I know.
It's just nonsense. These people never managed a small clinic before. This might work at academic medical centers, but these kind of plans don't work. What works is like one-on-one, as close as you can get to one-on-one between the owner, ideally, or at least the site director and employees as possible. And I have noticed that, like, I don't know who your first employee was. Was it that lady that was on our live stream, the commenting that one time? Was that your
Uh,
first?
no, no, no. I don't believe that was her. No.
Um, but like your first employee, I mean, I don't know anything about them, but I'm assuming if they're still with you or not. But that first one, you're literally in the trenches with them every day, right? For 3, 6 months, whatever. Then that second one comes, at least this is what's just happening with me with you McClenko trials. That second one comes along, your first one's kind of takes some of that responsibility from you onto the new person. But they're still equals more or less, because I'm still there.
Sure.
This third one, who I'm gonna hire, literally is gonna take my seat. So it's like not even possible for me to be there and hold her hand. It's really the other ones. And then the fourth one, even less so. So I feel like the more I hire, the more removed I am, the less control I have. That's where I think things could potentially get messy, but also there's also benefits to it. So the benefits being because I'm not as close, one of the tendencies I have, it's a bad habit, my wife's been telling me from the beginning is like almost becoming friends with my employees, which
Sure.
I don't know if I'll ever change it, but I'm definitely a lot better now than a decade ago. I mean, I was
No,
literally hiring my friends, but
right, right.
now I'm a little better, but that's still my tendency, and I wanted to get your take on this.
Yeah, I know. I get what you're saying, and I also think that the nature of maybe our businesses sort of bring that out because to your point, it's very hands on, right? I can't. I'm just not at a point where I can like hire people and be like, cool, go do it. You spend a lot of time working with them, and another thing to consider is, I'm guessing you like me. I don't know if this is good or bad, but a lot we are the business in a lot of ways, right? I mean, you and your relationships and your notoriety drive a lot of your business. So you can't really replace that. You can't really scale that either. You're always going to have uh, that role to some degree. It seems like. So yeah, I mean, I think just because we're still, I mean, even now, I'm still drawing blood. I'll still see patients. I'm still doing a little bit of everything.
Good
Uh,
for you. Is it because you want to or because it's necessary?
it's both. I mean, I think what I'm afraid of. I am afraid of like losing what we have in that regard. So like I want to continue to be involved, and like I don't know if you ever worked in a place where like the person managing has clearly never done the job. Like that sucks, right? Like I don't want to be that guy, you know. And
Hmm.
I did this not because I'm an entrepreneur who wants to start a bunch of businesses. I love this business and I love what I do. And the
Hmm.
point's not to get out of it; it's to be, do it the way I see best fit to do it. So I'll probably always be involved to that degree.
So
Maybe is
you
that
have
smart or not? Maybe not. Maybe it's not smart, but it's this is why I started my business so I can do things the way I
the
want to
way
do
you
them.
want, and it's what you know. I mean, I'm the same way in many senses. Like I feel like it's leading by example. Um, speaks louder than words. And the further removed you are, I know from my other sites that I had, as you start to structure it and build systems, you lose, you step out of the trenches for a little bit. You lose a little bit of respect when it's time to have a serious conversation with someone and say, "Hey, look, you didn't do this. I would have done this." I mean, even if they don't tell you, like, well, why didn't you do it? Or I never see you here. So how can you
Right,
know what
right.
I'm dealing with? That element, I think it's a necessary evil if you want to grow, but there's definitely something there. And, I guess my defense mechanism has always been like I think it's a retention strategy, honestly, for employees is just to be like super nice. Like, because I can't necessarily compete on salary most of the time. So, but I know I could treat you better than most people, and if I show you that, you're more likely to stay with me longer. But it has creates its own issues also.
Yeah, but I know, but you're right. I mean, that's a very good way to put it. And I'll say this: no one's quit in the 5 years that I've had this company. I haven't lost an employee up to this point.
Mm,
Again, not that there's like Oklahoma is not a place where you can go hopping around to other research opportunities necessarily, but I think as you like I can't pay my coordinators as much as I would like to yet. I try to pay them well. I take care of all their benefits and I pay that 100%. But to your point, like what can you offer? Well, you can offer being a human being and, maybe not being the best of friends, but treating them just like you would want to be treated, like
Yeah.
not. And I think to your point, some of that's not, it is being there and being present and being a resource for them, and not just being like, okay, I hired you, you do the job. And, I don't know about you, but I presume you're the same. I'm not raising money to try to flip a business. I'm trying to grow this thing out and be a part of it. You know what I mean? And I think maybe that's the difference is like, not just trying to raise and sell, trying to grow, build something.
Yeah. Yeah, I know, man. It's like, well, actually, with you, McLean Controls, I'm not sure. There's the opportunity definitely to flip it, and I've been transparent with my employees, but also there's the opportunity not to and just to grow it. So I'm not sure. I think it's just more the habit. Like I'm trying to not repeat the same mistakes I made at my other sites. And one of the hardest things for me is like this employee management because first of all, everyone's different. So you can't manage everyone the same. Second of all, there's no way you could ever make it fair. Like employee A, employee B, as fair as you try to make it, someone's always going to want to work a little harder, and somebody's always going to maybe want to advance their careers further than the other. So their career plans that they have for themselves are never the same. So it's a very dynamic environment, even with two employees.
Right.
And as you add more, like you have 12, I'm sure you can see this. Like one of the things I tell my employees is let me know what you want to accomplish. If you give me X number of years here, I'll help you do this. Like I'm kind of like the line manager before I even knew what that was. All the CROs have a line manager now to retain.
Right.
It's basically what I'm doing, except I think I actually can help a lot of these people. So half of the battle is getting honest, but it's very tough for me to be a disciplinarian because of the retention thing. And let's
Yeah.
face it, like sometimes you need to like, I mean, have you had to fire anyone yet?
I haven't, and I think I'm probably like you. I tend to give my employees a lot of grace and sometimes probably too much.
Do you think
But
they take advantage?
I would say overwhelmingly no. There have been instances, and again, I tend to be maybe too forgiving, I guess, depending on who you ask. But I feel like you, if I stand back and look, I'm like, look, these aren't, this isn't saying anything derogatory, but like everyone is different. These aren't. I'm not paying these people six figures to go out there and make me millions. Sometimes these are people who, in fairness, aren't being paid as much as I'd like to pay them. They don't necessarily have ambitions of being a site manager. You kind of like you have to really take stock of like what you have, and then to your point, it's not always fair. Everyone's different,
Mm-hmm.
and I feel like as long as I know, I can usually work with that. Right? Like, okay, I know this person. They do need to be told what to do. They need a little bit of guidance, and then this person over here, they're very ambitious. They can go get it on their own. Okay, that's as long as I know that, now I can change my approach, which again, it goes back to that idea that like you got to know that. You got to be there to recognize that to be and again, is it fair to treat them differently? I don't know, but I think it's more effective to don't act like everyone's the same person, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
they work better under this environment and these people work better under this one. And honestly, when those things happen, I tend to just blame myself for not being doing a better job of setting clear expectations or giving them the resources they need to do a better job. So I usually
Yeah.
consider that a failure of my own versus being mad at my employee.
Oh, all 100% all the time. It's a failure of our own. I think part of this interview is just picking your brain, even though I hate that expression, on what you do and how I do it. Seems like it's kind of similar. So we're probably talking an echo chamber, but I know a lot of other site owners are, if they're not going through this, they're gonna go through this. I've had a business partner before. It's not Chris. So Chris, if you're watching, don't worry, it's not you. Um, I think Chris is actually a really good manager. He doesn't get too friendly with staff, but he is, and I think he's like ideal actually for managing. But I had a former business partner at another site. He was a tyrant, man. Like employees would be afraid of him and come to me, and then I would default to my strategy of, well, let's just hang in there. How can I do? And he would approach me and say, "Hey, why are you not being consistent? Like we're management, they're workers." Um, I had a PI before tell me you can't treat the foreman like you do the manager. And so I often wonder, like, is there some truth to those statements? Am I just too far on this extreme? And honestly, I don't know the answer, man.
I mean, I'm right there with you. I've been through the same stuff, and I don't know. Again, I've worked jobs where uh, the managers are, very removed and are more, I don't know, tyrannical, if you want to use that phrase. And frankly, I didn't like it. I thought it sucked.
Hmm.
That might work in some environments, but ultimately, I think it comes down to, again, like that's not the environment I want to create. It's not the culture I want. Not
Hmm.
that it's right or wrong or indifferent, because again, I think those things can work in different situations depending on how you want to do things. Obviously, there are successful companies where the leaders are jerks or whatever the case may be, but that's just not how I want to do things. And ultimately, I tell people like, "Hey, man, sorry, it's Hightower Clinical. If you
I
want it to
like
be
that,
if
by
you
the
want it to
way.
be your name clinical, then you're welcome to start your own company and run it however you want to. But
Have you told someone that yet
oh yeah, I've told people
at Hightower
that.
Clinical?
Sure.
And what
And
do they say?
oh, nothing. I mean, I I like to think I create an environment where like my employees can talk to me. And
Hmm.
you're welcome to disagree with me. And look, I'm not saying that I won't take things under consideration because obviously I do that. I am the first to admit that I'm not always right, and I'm far from right. And sometimes I'm completely wrong. So, but I think things that are more matters of preference. Because look, I don't know your experience, but things tend to work themselves out over time. Sometimes you just need some patience and you don't have to jump in and yell at somebody or discipline people. Sometimes you need to take a softer approach and they work themselves out in time. And you've also avoided maybe embarrassing that person or pissing them off or done something that,
Yeah,
you might have done if you had acted too hastily.
I
Uh,
agree.
so again, a lot of times I think it's just a matter of preference. There's not necessarily always a right or wrong way to do things.
I think a lot of times just having time, like letting time elapse between X event happening and your reaction. I've learned that early on. Like I had one of my, I think she was employee number 3 at my very first site in '06. She was an experienced CRC, came from USC, and but she had a lot of baggage she brought with her, and a lot of it was like manipulation tactics too, looking back. And I remember she did something where she was trying to get the other employees against me. And rather than reacting, I was pissed, man. I just drove. I remember that day. I drove to the beach and just like sat and looked at the water. I was like 15 minutes away from the beach at that time. I just went to cool off, came back, did nothing. And then the next day I talked to her and it was like a lot better than what I would have done if I
Right.
reacted right then and there. Like she probably would have been gone.
Yeah,
And
yeah, and
and
sometimes that's all it takes. And I learned this too before I even started in research is that you can solve a lot of problems just by listening. Sometimes you don't have to do anything; just start the conversation. Like, hey, what's up? What
Mm,
is there something wrong? Is there something we can do to fix? And then not necessarily, sometimes you don't have to do much other than listen, hear people out because a lot of times they just don't feel heard or need to vent or get something off their chest. So I used to work in a plasma center and employees would constantly get in fights and bicker with each other. And I just sit them down together and just do nothing, let them talk. And 90% of the time that would resolve, the issue. So again, it's not always, I think it's about being able to put your pride aside, not having too strong of an ego sometimes.
Yeah, that's definitely the case, and that's one thing I do work on. I think that's a strength of mine is not try not to have the ego. I mean, the more of this is one of the things I was telling you off camera, like the more of these videos you make and the more podcasts you make, um, you get like, and you see this too, you get, I guess, a lot of undeserved praise, and it's very easy to let your ego run wild and essentially become a cartoon character of yourself because we're
Sure.
we're we're doing like a daily feedback loop. Like sometimes I tell you, like I already know if I post this, it's gonna do well. And then other times you get surprised, but um it's very easy to like manipulate that feedback loop and lose who you actually are,
Sure.
because I know it works well for my post. It's career motivation, but if I keep doing that just to feed the loop, I actually lose the essence of what I'm trying to do. Like that's part of
Sure.
what my essence, but not all of it. That's why I say becoming a cartoon character of yourself. So I actually think this YouTube stuff is helping me keep my ego in check for like being a manager, um, in some respects, and also networking with other guys like you who obviously know what they're doing. Like I don't feel like I'm the only one. Like, oh, Brad does this, Dr. Fox is gonna do this. Like who am I at the end of the day? Like if my company went out of business, pretty much nobody would care except my PIs and the few employees I have. So
Right.
I'm really like a nobody in the space. And that's been helpful.
Yeah, that's, I
Um,
mean, like, I feel like that. And I just remind myself, like, nobody cares. I'm just a guy
Nobody
on the
cares,
internet.
man.
I'm just a guy on the internet, complaining. So ultimately, at the end of the day, it's, you know, not what I feel like what I do in that regard's not impactful. So hopefully that's not ever an issue to my ego. I hope. But I get what you're saying. Sometimes it's a little too easy to sort of, fall into that character, like you said, so to speak. But
Yeah.
I do
It's
think, like
actually,
you say, as you talk to people though, like we're all going through the same stuff, like we all deal with the same problems. So I think it is very grounding to talk to someone. Even this conversation has like gone away I didn't expect and been a little bit enlightening. I think, like, oh man, we've dealt with the same problems, and sometimes in same ways or different ways, but I think that's cathartic.
yeah, it's definitely a dense topic. So we could shift to like a little less dense. I think actually the reason why I wanted to interview you on this topic was attracting talent. You're in a community similar to mine, Yuma, where you're not like just finding talent dropping out of the sky. You have to like kind of go out and get these people. And in your case, it's a lot of phlebotomists, MAs, CNAs, just like me. You work with the natural resources you have at your disposal. You made an Indeed post, right? Where
Mm-hmm.
it was very creative. You're like storytelling. And you posted it on LinkedIn. I was amazed by this, man.
Yeah, I mean, so I don't know. I went and looked. Uh, I don't know. In other jobs I work, people are like obsessed with job descriptions, and I'm like, okay, I don't. You go read them for coordinators, and if you're not a coordinator, first of all, a lot of it makes no sense. You start reading about
Yeah.
PIs and AEs and GCP, and you're like, what even is that? So right off the bat, you're sort of creating like a intimidating environment for people who aren't in clinical trials. And again, I just think back to like how I got into it. I was like purely by accident. I was a phlebotomist. I was a great phlebotomist, if I do say so myself. And uh, I wanted something more. I felt like I was capable of doing something more. So again, I just tried to remember what that felt like and then try to appeal to people who are like me, you know? And I think there's a lot of people like that out there. They don't love their jobs and maybe they love a part of what they do, but just want something more. So it's more about, again, like everything, just be a human being. Like say it in plain words.
But your job posting and your LinkedIn post was so radical because it's so different. So you literally wrote a story. You're like, "Hi, my name is Brad. I started out as a phlebotomist," and I don't remember it word for
Yeah.
word, but
Yeah. Yeah. You pretty much got it. Yeah.
you got into like a story, and then I asked you the other day, like, how did that post do? Actually, I'm curious, and how did it do?
Yeah. I think we did. Yeah. We got about 40 applications in like a day and a half. And I just shut it off because I didn't want to keep paying Indeed.
So
I was able,
far exceeded the normal response to
yeah,
these
I mean, it
queries.
was way more than I expected for sure. And we were able to hire, and we have a great phlebotomist, and we're getting her, all trained up on the research side of things, and it worked out really well. And yeah, I got a lot of positive feedback from. I mean, I didn't think it was anything that special. I just thought it was dumb when you look at how most research job positions are listed. Again, they're most like purposefully gatekeeping.
You're right, man. I did one and my second employee, but it was very simple. It's like, hey, we will teach you how to be a coordinator. This is a great industry. Here's a video on like what I put one of my videos on
Nice.
what it's about. It's not as far as a story. I think that's even better, man. So I think next time I'm gonna do something like that. Um, okay, so now this person comes in, they're a new employee. What kind of training do you do? Because I put mine in the CRC Academy. I have the benefit of having that, so it's free for our employees. So I put them in 3 months. You're not gonna know day-to-day things necessarily, but you're gonna know the basics, the fundamentals. So what do you do like new employee day one? What do you have them do?
Yeah, I mean, frankly, for better or worse, it's a lot of shadowing. It's a lot of working with the current coordinators, and I think there's some benefit in getting the sort of diversity of perspective from different coordinators because I think everyone's got you know a little bit different way of doing things, different way of seeing things. So I think it's for better or worse, it's a lot of manpower, like working with the different coordinators, working with me as much as I can. I did have some of my early coordinators go through the CRC Academy, and I think it was a big benefit because you do get exposed to like all the acronyms and concepts because as you know, like even as a day to day as a coordinator, coordinators can do everything or they can do a very small scope of things. So even that's
Mhm.
tricky because no two coordinators are the same.
What do you have yours
Um,
do? Do you have them be generalist or do you?
yeah, I
'Cause
try to keep them very general. Now, they don't touch as much on the regulatory side,
I see, because that's
but
still you mostly.
yeah, just because I can push it fast and get it done. I mean, they still will start to manage the binder after that, but it's more of like the startup I'll handle. But other than that, generally speaking, they kind of do the whole shebang. They'll consent, they'll draw the blood, they'll do the clinical assessments that they're delegated to do, collect the data, keep up with the patient, scheduling them, and
Meet
everything
PI
there.
for signatures, stuff like that.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. So again, it's even that varies though from study to study, depending on the complexity and availability and things like that. So as much as I hate it in a way, I feel like it's still the best way because you're going to see
Hmm.
more. It's just going to take a long time, you know. And even then, it
Yeah,
depends on where your studies are. If a study in follow up is much different than a study that's enrolling, um, and especially even a
sure.
study that's been enrolling for a week is different than a study that's been enrolling for 8 months.
Did
You know,
you did you to kind of go? And if you have to leave, just let me know, man. But this, it's
like
like
we're going long. Looks like we're going long.
this is you wanted long form, man,
That's
and
true.
it's not the long form I really want to do with cracking open some of these. But it's way too early for
Yeah, I
that.
got I got some down here. Yeah, man. It's yeah, we
It's
started early for everybody out there who sees this.
yep. Okay, I'm at the stage now where I have two employees, about to have a third. We have geez, 6 or 7 studies. Probably 2 more starting soon. So it's a good amount of studies. I'm still at the point where I'm not assigning one particular coordinator responsibility for like you're the lead CRC for this study, you are for this one. We're just all doing the same for every study.
Hmm.
And I've already noticed, and it goes against my philosophy. I want everyone to be a generalist because I don't want to be too dependent on any one person. Because I've seen that happen in the past where they could take you hostage in a way, your employees, that happened to me in my first company, and it won't happen again. I mean, they would do things I couldn't even do. Like I was like, geez, this person quits. Like
Yeah,
even I
you
can't
got
step
bad
in and do
luck.
anything.
Right,
Do you
right.
know what I'm talking about?
Sure.
Um, so I'm not having that again, at least as much as I can control it. So what I'm doing to make things fair, because there are, even with these two coordinators I have, one is good at these things, the other is good at these things. It'd be very easy to, hey, you specialize on this, you specialize in this, but I don't want that. So I talked to them the other day. I said, look, we're gonna have, and we still haven't grouped out the tasks, like the core tasks, like PI signatures, scheduling patients, pre-screening, IP accountability, regulatory maintenance, responding to monitors, and there's probably more I'm missing. These tasks, these groups of tasks. Every week, I'm assigning groups of tasks to someone else. So this week, this is your job. Next week, this is your job. And we have it written on a board. So if something happens, there is one person that's responsible. Because the way it currently is, something happened and this has already happened. Things happen, and you're like, well, hey, we're all responsible. And I'm like you, it's like, well, ultimately it's my fault. But how long can that go on? Like, we actually have to have somebody responsible, and it can't just be me every time. Otherwise, why am I hiring people?
Right.
So this is what I came up with that I think works well for small stuff, for low number of studies. I think once you get to like where you're at, I'm not sure that works well. I think it's more traditional, like you're in charge of these studies, you're in charge of these ones, but you guys
Yeah.
all back each other up. Like what,
Yeah.
where do you go? Have you done what I am doing now and
Not,
evolved into something
yeah,
else?
not exactly. It's been always kind of more of, we've got a bunch of people cross trained, obviously, across other people's studies. So it's more of like, these are the studies in which you're the lead. You've got your backup here. Now, if you guys, I'll give you guys some leeway here as to how you want to manage that. So either in a lot of instances, the backup's not really doing much of anything. There's there. In some instances, the backup might be actively involved and do just data entry to help that person out, depending on which studies are popping and which ones aren't. So to some degree, it kind of sorts itself out. But going back, like you, it was kind of like everybody's on everything. But I did find over time things sort of took on their own, uh, organization. And I don't know. I get what you're saying. I do think it's important to have that level of generalization, but at the same time, I wasn't necessarily actively like spreading the work out. And I get
Mm,
what you mean. That could be a bad thing because, yeah, if you lose a person, then you could be screwed potentially. But I think even for me, it's like I've always been the type to like, look, I want to know it all and be able to do it all, but I'm going to double down on my strengths versus
right.
focusing on my weaknesses. So I kind of let the coordinators lean into that as they saw fit. Because ultimately, again, it's about like, I want you to be able to do what you want to do. You need to be able to do everything. You need to be able to, regardless, but you don't always have to,
Mm.
just because it's like a rule that I want to,
As
abide
a,
by.
I don't think there's like I don't think it's binary either, like between
Right.
0 and 1. I think there's infinite numbers there.
Yeah, you're right. But to your point, I think, if the worst happens, if your backup goes away and they were helping, you need to be able to step in and do the whole
Yeah,
shebang. So it's
yeah,
not that you, I say, oh, don't worry about learning that because you'll never need to do it. Well, no, you need to know it. Now, whether or not you're actively doing it on all of your trials, I'll kind of leave up to you and the person you're working with, because I don't want you guys fighting about who's doing what because I told you to. I'll let you sort it out.
yeah. I don't know if there's any right or wrong way to do it because there's problems on both ends, and
Yeah.
um, I've already noticed it with these two coordinators, and I have the sense of like knowing what happened in other companies. Like I'm not new anymore. So even with my two staff, I already noticed one likes to do more data entry and IRB portals and all that. And the other one does more like patient facing things and um, That's what they like. But the danger is, and it's already started happening, when one is out, the other one says, "Well, I don't really know how to do that. She's been
Yeah,
doing
yeah,
all this stuff." So I'm like, no, no, we can't. What? Entropy, that's entropy. If I did nothing and just
it's
kept hiring more
chaos.
people, like everybody would just fall into what they do. And yeah, they'd find a way to make it work because we have to. But when it all boils down to it, like you're creating like basically specializations, which is a small scale of like what universities do,
Yeah,
which I,
that's
I don't
fair.
want.
That's a fair point. And I will say, I mean, something I mean, I'm even experiencing as we grow is that I'm sort of like backfilling a lot of my processes rather than having had them, which I'm hitting that inflection point where like I really need the processes to be tight because like you said, it just becomes pure chaos. You know what I mean? But unlike a lot of people, I didn't start out like with SOPs. You hear people that are like, well, I need SOPs before I start a site. I'm like, you don't even know what you're doing. You don't even know how it's going to work. So I've probably gone the opposite direction in that, like, you know, trying different things to see what makes the most sense. And then standing back and saying like, okay, what worked the most, or what was the most efficient or effective way to do things. And now we can start sort of reverse engineering, you know, how some of these processes work. But I'm the type that's probably let that go for too long without formalizing a lot of our
Mm-hmm.
processes
Mm-hmm.
as good as I should. Now it's working because my employees have been great. You know, they get what needs to be done. But uh, if we get any bigger, I think it will be could get too messy. You know what I'm saying?
Hmm. Yeah, I've noticed that too. Like, well, when I hear backstopping, I think of me filling in when they're busy doing things because I can do it. Well, I can do some things better than them, or at least as good as them now. Like labs, for example. Like that's
Sure.
another task I'm gonna put. Like whose role is it this week to do labs and go to FedEx or call FedEx, whatever you gotta do, get the dry ice. When they're busy, I do it.
Sure.
And if I don't stop doing that, they just expect it, you know?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I don't do it all the time, but it's just I don't know what the answers are, man. And as you grow, it just gets more complex too. So
Well, and yeah, again, that's where I'm starting to really appreciate your, you know, small is the new big, you know, motto
that's
because
catchy, huh?
it is sort of like, I mean, how far do I want to go before it's like it's not what I envisioned anymore, you know?
Yeah.
Like, and that's fine. People do that. They grow it out and become big corporate structure. But I feel like, again, that's just, at least for now, that's not what I want, you know? But to your point, I've got two coordinators who are new. They've both been here a while now. I just now got them into phlebotomy classes. And I'm finally like, you know what? You're going to have to figure it out. You draw the blood. I'm not going to be here to help you, back you up. And now I'm kind of throwing you into the fire, you know, but you got to do that. I can't be here to, you know,
Mhm.
always back everything up.
Yeah. Yeah. There, exactly. I think that's the right strategy. There are some things that I will ask them if they want to do, like that are a little bit outside of the scope of being a coordinator, like what we ended our last podcast on, the social media outreach, content
Mm,
creation strategy. I offered it to both of the coordinators because I didn't want them to fight and say, "Oh, you get the fun stuff, I don't." So I offered it to both, but I already knew what one would say yes, one would say no. I already knew, but I just did it, and it's exactly what happened. And um, it's not like I'm forcing the other one to say, "Oh no, you got to go out there on camera and do this,"
right.
because I need generalists. So I'm not like strict to this philosophy, but at least for the core job functions of what I think a CRC are, I kind of am, and I'm kind of forcing it to.
And it's not a bad thing. You're giving exposure to them and a lot. And I went backwards. I hired somebody with a marketing background to take some of our inbound advertising calls. We were getting a ton at the time
Mm,
and work on social media. And now I'm having her learn regulatory because you know, especially with Veeva, can all be done very remotely,
hmm
which you know allows that opportunity. So now I'm kind of started her from the outside, bringing her into the bigger picture of research now.
In an ideal world, I guess we could end with this because you have what, you have 12, you said 12 employees.
Yeah.
So let's say you get to like 22 or something like that. And you know that if you streamline the business, it's going to be way better for you, more predictable, more efficient. People become plug and play. Their job satisfaction is maybe not going to be as good, um, or maybe it's just more boring for them, but it works better for you. Do you keep it the way it is, or do you go in that direction?
Yeah, it's a great question. That's a bridge, I'll have to cross someday.
Jump.
Look, if you're, yeah, right. Well, if you're listening to this, go. I made a post about this, but it applies to sites and like these newly formed IROs. But like, go to Glassdoor, read some reviews.
Mm,
They're Some of them are just embarrassingly bad. And these are companies with millions of dollars and resources well beyond what I'll ever have access to. And again, for me, that's like what I don't want to become. Right. I want to continue to create an environment where people want to work, they like what they do. There's no reason that we can't have some balance between the two. So I don't know. It'll be a good call. Talk to me in 5 years when I'm exhausted and the rest of my hair is falling out, and maybe I'll have a different perspective, and maybe I'll be like, you know what? I don't care. I'm ready to sell out on this thing. But right now, I mean, again, I want to build slowly and sustainably, and
mhm.
at least keep the vision as much as I can for as long as I can. And if that's a pain in the ass, then it's just what it is.
So be it. So you're like me in the sense where you're an artist, at least still in the sense of you're creating your work for others. Also, that's the revenue we get, but also for yourself to some extent. Um, yeah, I think
Man, that's not a bad way to put it. I've never thought about it that way, but especially from someone who used to be a musician, I like that
I forgot about that,
comparison
man.
as
Yeah,
an
no,
artist. I
there's
like
there's
that.
two types of artists, man. They're the ones that only care about what the others think and they sell out. And there's the ones who never sell out, so they're broke, right?
Right, the starving artist.
Yep. And then there's the ones that kind of balance that dance and make a living and also true to themselves.
That's the grind, isn't it? Trying to get it right.
I guess it's a good way to end it because we can just go another 3 more hours. But Brad, note to file. Everybody go check him out. Note to file podcast. Brad Hightower. His LinkedIn's underneath. If you're not connected with him, what the hell's wrong with you? Go do it. And thank you, Brad. It's good to catch up, man.
Yeah, dude. Always. I'm sure we'll have plenty more in the new year, but I appreciate the opportunity,
Oh
man.
man, Happy New Year. And what a way to end 2022 with this is the last podcast of the year for me, man. So
I'm honored.
um yeah, man, me too. So thank you, Guru Nation. Thank you, Brad. Thank you everybody for watching. Like, subscribe, comment, share. Bye-bye.